Welcome to the third live situation debate of 2025. We're going to be asking whether resilience is the new ESG. The Situation Room is a thought leadership forum where we discuss key issues in ESG, sustainability, and health and safety. And wherever you're joining us from around the world, and whatever time, whether it's live or on catch-up, please engage. It's a forum where we debate things, and we don't believe in that any of the questions that we're asking have final answers, but there's a lot of learning that we can do if we raise difficult questions and get stuck into them. Now, today we have joining us, we have Caroline Johnson, CEO of Rawstone Consulting, Rick Benfield, founder and manager of OCSO Group, OCSO Group, David Picton, the senior vice principal on safety and sustainability at EcoOnline, and myself, chief science officer at EcoOnline. The topic really gets to the heart of the future of ESG and related sustainability topics. ESG has typically been known as a set of responsibilities that cover the relationship between business and the social environment in which it operates. The underlying argument behind ESG goes that businesses can only thrive if they minimize their impact on the environment and the social fabric, and contribute and put back as much as they take out over the long term. Yet, over the recent years, ESG has been attacked from both left and right for various reasons. From the left, it's been criticized for sort of papering over the cracks, not making fundamental changes, and maybe sort of minimizing the need for transformational change. And on the right, it's been criticized for diverting from the real business of making money for investors, and diverting from core purpose of business to look after customers. And but what we've also seen in recent years is that businesses have been facing a number of major challenges, ranging from the pandemics, from trade uncertainties, from wars and other conflicts. And increasingly, ESG actions have been started to look at through the lens of resilience, i.e., can the business continue, recover, respond to these shocks, and thrive in a kind of uncertain world? So we're going to be looking at the future of ESG through the lens of resilience and asking some interesting questions. Just before we get on to that, I'd love to get a little bit of more background of our participants. So Caroline, would you like to just give us a quick background of Rawstone Consulting and the kind of organizations that you serve?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. So yeah, I'm managing director of Rawstone Consulting. We're a boutique ESG and sustainability consultancy. We help companies primarily with developing ESG strategies and net zero plans. In terms of our clients, we are industry agnostic, but we tend to work with B2B companies, and they're typically medium to large companies based in the UK, but often with operations in America, Europe, or Australia.
Thanks very much. And Rick, what about OCSO Group? Keen to understand the kind of range of businesses that you look after.
Yeah, thank you, Richard, and great to be here. So OCSO, or OCSO, some people call it, stands for Outsourced Chief Sustainability Officers. So we are a collective of experienced sustainability professionals who provide a fractional sustainability director service to SMEs. So that means we work with leadership teams and boards on an ongoing basis to provide advice and guidance on what to prioritize and what actions to take to have maximum impact when it comes to ESG and sustainability. Because we're engaged on an ongoing basis, we take a long-term view and really help to embed sustainability and crucially align efforts with the commercial objectives of the organizations we work with. Like Caroline at Rawstone, we are sector agnostic and currently have clients in the tech sector, retail, manufacturing, professional services, textiles, and also B2C subscription services as well.
Thanks very much. It's fascinating. David, do you also want to say a bit about the kind of range of customers that EcoOnline deals with on the ESG side?
Yeah, indeed. Thanks, Richard. Yeah, so Senior VP of Sustainability and Safety here at EcoOnline. As you say, we've got quite a broad range of customers. Our focus is trying to provide a connected suite of software solutions, if you like, that brings together data across ESG, environment, health, safety, chemical safety as well, and brings that all together so that the organisations we work with have got visibility across a whole range of potential risks or opportunities for the business as well. And those geographies that we cover, UK and Ireland, Europe, particularly a lot of work in Canada and the US, and then into Asia Pac as well with Australia and New Zealand. And what we're finding is that sectors from manufacturing to retail, construction, logistics, healthcare, professional services, a lot of the themes are common. Of course, there's the aim is to bring together that data, as you're saying, the visibility that it brings around protection of the environment, protection of people, particularly, of course, really, so that you can bring out some more intelligent insights from that data, protecting people and the planet, and hopefully building a more resilient organisation. So we have definitely seen that move towards resilience in terms of the return on the investment that's being made in those solutions.
Interesting. Well, perhaps I'll come on to the first question and ask Caroline. Do you think that the criticisms that I mentioned from the left and the right about ESG perhaps going off focus, either not delivering true benefits for the environment, not making companies truly, allowing companies to get away with greenwashing on the one hand, or else diverting attention away from more financial benefits? Do you think that those criticisms have merit? Or maybe not in the companies you work with, of course, but what have you seen in the sector?
In short, I would guess yes, but I do think times are changing. So the last 2-3 years has been a huge push on disclosures as a result of increasing legislation in the EU and the US, as well as the evolution of best practice. And I could litter you with acronyms on that side of things. But, as a result, companies have basically, were forced to employ not insignificant amounts of resources on measuring and reporting. And ultimately, with finite resources, they do that over the doing. So, there is an argument of potentially they've progressed too little and it's cost a lot. What I would say is that things obviously are really changing massively at the minute as well. So now that a lot of that legislation is being, frankly, swept to one side, and what we're finding is that our clients and companies they're having to revisit why they went on this journey in the first place. And actually, for most of our clients, it hasn't changed anything. They've taken the opportunity to reassess, well, why have we done it? And they've realized that they actually had huge value from it. So they've attracted investors, customers, or team members, and actually they're just seeing it as an opportunity to take the foot off the gas with the reporting, but not with the direction of travel and achieving their targets.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Rick, have you seen something similar, or do you see other forces at play?
Yeah, just to pick up on what Caroline was saying, I think what the critics on the right, if you like, are often missing is that a strategic focus on ESG can itself be a value creator for a business. So both looking at top line revenue growth and bottom line profit margins. I work with a private equity firm which is operating in a sector not necessarily known for caring about anything other than making financial returns, and yet they've recognized the value creation opportunity that ESG brings, and include this not only in their due diligence process when looking to acquire a company, but very much in the value creation plans they develop post acquisition. So I think that piece on the right is often underestimated and sort of looked over when you get criticism saying we're not focusing on core business activity or generating returns. In terms of the critics from the left who say that businesses are sometimes perhaps misleading customers with the claims that they're making, I think that has been true in part, sometimes deliberately, for sure, sometimes mistakes made with the best intention. But I think the new regulation we've got and the guidance in the UK, Green Claims Code in the UK, which is government guidance to help businesses stay on the right side of consumer protection law when making green claims, is helping, along with the potential fines attached, is really helping to stamp out greenwashing. And the EU have the equivalent in the Green Claims Directive as well. So I think there was perhaps elements of greenwashing in the past, no doubt about that, but the regulation has caught up on this. And last year I did a huge amount of work with the advertising industry, and believe me, that industry is scared of the lawsuits and claims that are being filed all around the world now related to unsubstantiated sustainability claims in adverts, with ad firms and indeed consultancy firms getting dragged into multi-million-dollar lawsuits and being fined. So that is certainly helping things to change on that front. And arguably, actually, it's led to a new phenomenon called greenwashing, where greenwashing being the opposite of greenwashing, where firms are doing some really good stuff but choosing not to talk about it publicly for fear of retribution from either activists that are looking for perfection or from fines associated with the regulation. And just one more point, I do think there's merit in the criticism that businesses are not going far or fast enough. There's still a lot of kicking the can down the road and a lot of small incrementalism going on. And there are a whole host of reasons for that, which require their own podcast. But I do think to tackle that, I think us sustainability folk have to do better at selling the vision, selling the future, selling why being sustainable is better, not just for people and the planet, but also for profit. We focus too much perhaps on the scary issues, climate change, biodiversity loss, social inequality, and perhaps not enough on what the future and how the future can be better than the present if we tackle the issues and implement the solutions. So yeah, that painting the picture, I think we've got a role to play there. And I am also supportive of regulation when done in the right way. I think it can spur innovation and ensure a level playing field, but it's often playing catch up to reality. So in the meantime, while we wait for better regulation, we do have to do a better job of selling the positive future and selling ESG and sustainability in a good light.
Thanks. That is fascinating perspective. And I think there's some great points there about the upsides of ESG for business. David, I'm interested for you to bring your experience to bear on this. I think that that there were some excellent points there. Do you think that that greenwashing days are kind of numbered, and that we are sort of looking at a new era of ESG in the light of that?
It'd be nice to think, wouldn't it? Yeah, so I go back to my days as a chief sustainability officer as well, sort of going back over the last 10, 15, maybe even 20 years, where we've been, developing what we now have today as the area. I think there's some merit in the criticism against, the agenda really, but particularly where the ESG message has been hijacked, if you like. If it's been hijacked by marketing teams to put some gloss or some superficial cover, if you like, the greenwashing that we've just talked about, really, if it's covering up poor behaviour, I think that then definitely it deserves its criticism. But for me, one of the other areas is where the agenda gets hijacked for a single issue, sort of quite often by fanatical campaigners. Rightly so, there's a big focus on the environment. Perhaps in some areas there's a bit of an over focus on the environment and climate, really, because it misses the point of a balance with social and governance as well, I think, really. And in some cases, of course, we've seen that over the last 5-10 years, stray into sort of quite militant or even violent campaigns and destructions. And I think when you see that kind of thing, it alienates people and it misses the point, as Rick, I think, touched on, really, about the benefit and the opportunity and the purpose behind this, really. So I think where the criticism is not merited is where companies and leadership teams are actually bringing out the fundamental value, exactly as my sort of fellow panelists have said, really. When you bring out the value, tie this into a strategy, build opportunities for revenue, genuine reputation improvement, and genuine evidence of action for responsible business. That's where it becomes more than just an inconvenient truth, I think. It actually becomes a real business strategy driven by an understanding of what's material. And I think the point is, of course, there isn't just one type of ESG. There is an ESG that is appropriate and material for each organisation and sector, as long as it's tackling the areas that it needs to.
Yeah, just to go on to the different sectors. I'm really interested to know, Caroline, whether you've come across any particular sectors that exhibit certain behaviours, or is this kind of more generic and unpredictable? And I'm just interested, are there either sectors or geographies that stand out for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think we're seeing the biggest shift in the US market. So we have a Fortune 500 client, and after a year and a half or 2 years of work, they're all ready to go with their CSRD report, and they pulled it at the last minute because of the omnibus removal of the regulatory requirement. And it wasn't, they had it all written in French code. It reflected really a lack of confidence that their disclosures would be seen positively. So, that's not a good thing in my mind. But that's in quite stark contrast, I think, to our clients that are predominantly UK. Anyone who's working, if any of our clients that are working for the UK government, or they've got big business customers themselves, or they've got large UK or EU investors, they know that doing more in the ESG space means, they win more work, they attract more investors. It's just fundamentally good business. In some industries, David, it's a built environment, it's a license to operate. And for me, I think ultimately this is where resilience comes in. David touched on it with the materiality, and that's really key. Anyone who's ever done a materiality exercise or just tried to work out the business case for ESG knows it boils down to, if you do it well, you align with the expectations of your stakeholders. And ultimately, if you're a business with good relationships with your stakeholders, you are much more likely to be able to withstand the crisis and get the support you need than if you have bad relationships.
That's very interesting. Rick, have you noted any particular groups or types of businesses that have sort of moved one way or another on this?
Yeah, if I just think about specific issues, I think if I compare the UK and Europe with the US, which are the geographies I know most about, I think on average the UK and Europe are way ahead, or have been way ahead of American companies when taking action on climate and emissions. And I think it's pretty much accepted by most people on this side of the pond that climate change is a real thing and that we have to do something about it. I mean, don't get me wrong, we still have climate change deniers, and I do meet plenty in boardrooms as well. But I think the general population is on board, and all the surveys back this up. But there's a much bigger divide in the US on the topic, and of course it has been heavily politicized over there in the US. On the other hand, the US until recently have been very strong on DE&I, diversity, equity and inclusion, and developing programs in that area. And the Europeans have been playing catch up to a certain extent. Now, of course, Mr. Trump is challenging this, and publicly US companies have backed away from their DE&I policies as a consequence of quite literal blackmail in some cases by the US government. Having said that, many large US corporates are still running the programs just under different names. In terms of sectors, I think it does vary. This is often, in my experience, driven by the visibility of the sector and whether they're perceived as high polluters or viewed in a negative light or not in the public domain. And that's what's spurring action, and then often followed by regulation. So I'm thinking about the construction industry and regulation like Section 106 here in the UK, which requires developers to contribute positively to the local community, or more recently, the biodiversity net gain legislation, which requires developers to implement projects that will benefit nature. The fashion industry is seeing a big focus on waste, overconsumption and human rights in the supply chain. The aviation industry, big focus on innovation for new types of fuel, such as sustainable aviation fuel or hydrogen fuel. And these are sectors that are kind of quite visible in the minds of the public and get quite a lot of attention in the media, and therefore those sectors or industries are having to take action, and then regulation is starting to follow. So yeah, I think there are challenges, and indeed different challenges depending on the sector in terms of the maturity of approaches to ESG between geographies and sectors.
That's fascinating. David, I mean, what are your thoughts on whether resilience and this term resilience has been used or is increasingly being used to get traction by sustainability professionals in the boardroom and with the CFO?
Yeah, as you say, increasingly being used, I think, and I like it, to be honest. In the 10 or 20 years that I've been sort of working in sustainability for, I like the idea that we're tying it much more closely to business performance as well, because we should have been all along, and the most forward-thinking ones are, I think. But particularly after the shocks of COVID, the Ukraine conflict and what have you, which has driven up issues around supply chains and the interconnectedness of international business now, and costs of energy and so on and so forth. So there are new threats and challenges that are coming through, and when you link those together with areas like cybersecurity, I think we're currently seeing some real issues with retail in the UK under attack from cyber attacks as well. I think all of this gives the ESG professional a chance to take a holistic view of the overlapping risks, if you like, and building that relationship between better business, if you like, winning work, better reputation, operational efficiencies, cutting waste, engaging people, all those sorts of things that ESG has been doing when it's done it well. That brings out that opportunity, I think, for the wider potential of a balanced approach, which helps to build a more resilient organisation if it's embedded into the strategy and the operation. It's not seen as something separate on the side by a small team. It's actually something which is the way in which that organisation works. So that gives them a chance to bring a focus more onto nearer term risks and challenges, which are the way in which that company goes into battle, if you like, in the commercial sense. But it also gives a chance to change some of the language, really. We always used to talk about the idea that CSR really stood for common sense, really, actually, just doing the right things. But I've extended that metaphor, and ESG for me really stands for extremely sensible goals. And what we're really talking about now, what are the extremely sensible goals that will make this company more resilient and able to cope with those shocks when they happen? And a lot of those come from putting into place ethical, responsible behaviours, engaging people to do that in a consistent way. But most importantly of all, framing ESG as a business case. It's not something nice on the side that you have to afford. It's actually something you can't afford not to do, because it makes that business better and more effective.
Thanks very much, David. Yes, that's fascinating. I mean, I'm interested, Caroline. Have you seen the way that professionals in sustainability work and how they've changed their views or their language in responding to these kind of challenges? And do you see the new professionals sort of working more in a sort of business aligned or resilience promoting way, or I think that some of the young professionals are still actually very much committed to the sustainability goals, the broader sustainability goals as well. So I'm interested to know what you think about the younger members of the profession and how they're dealing with it.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone through so many acronyms and names for this, haven't we? CR, CSR, sustainability, ESG, resilience. I think there's lots of different language that's used. For me, the resilience line is working best with the bigger companies. I think they're a bit more mature in their approach to risk management and so forth. For smaller companies, perhaps less so. But I think in terms of the younger generation coming in, most of them have come into this industry and, there's huge numbers coming in because of their passion to actually implement change. And I think, it's quite refreshing that what they're driven to do is to not the numbers and the reporting, but what can I do with the numbers? How can I actually, implement a change as a result of that? And I think that to me is actually what's really exciting about this point in time is that, how do we use the data? And actually we're seeing, for example, we did a materiality exercise. We were interviewing loads of really large businesses recently about carbon, asking, do they need to have science-based targets? Do they need to have transition plans? And the answer was across the board, no, they just need to be taking action. And, oh, by the way, can they work together with us on that? And so I think it's this sort of collaboration, this openness, the getting stuff done is what people are more interested in, I suppose, rather than the semantics of the language at the younger age anyway. And I guess just the other thing I wanted to touch on briefly, and picking up on David's point about this sort of carbon tunnel vision that we can sometimes get, I think that's probably the other thing that's coming to the fore is really the social challenges. People coming into the workforce, wanting to work in sustainability. It's hard to get into any job these days. You've got AI taking over, and that's also going to have a knock-on carbon effect. But you've got just transition, and I think what will be quite interesting is if we stop focusing too much on reporting. There are certain ESG topics that don't lend themselves to data, particularly in that social space, and that will probably open a few more conversations around those and allow them to have their time in the limelight.
Yeah, that's it's a fascinating perspective. I mean, I think ESG has been so wrapped up in generating reports and information. I think there's been, and it's often criticised for spending more effort on reporting, but I have also seen significant differences where legislation is coming in that. Where reporting is required. I'm looking at the latest version of the EU deforestation regulation, and the differences, that are being demanded by that regulation means that companies are almost forced to take certain actions and look out for certain things and prevent certain things. So I think, yes, reporting can be criticised, but it does often really help focus companies on certain actions in certain ways. But it's very difficult to get that balance right, I think. I don't know, Rick, what your thoughts on the young professionals and where they sort of will kind of contribute and how they will address this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating topic, actually, because you often read in surveys how young people care more about these things and want to do, want to help, want to do better. But I'm not sure that always plays out in reality, actually, from the experience that I've seen in the workplaces and the businesses that I work with and speak to about young people. Certainly, there's a huge number that are enthusiastic and want to get involved in this space. But I think there's also still quite a lot of apathy amongst the young people as well. And I often talk about the 10-80-10 rule when I work with businesses in terms of their employee base. And I think this extends to the wider population as well when you look at it from a consumer angle. But you've got 10% of people within an organization that are really enthusiastic and keen and interested in the topic of ESG or sustainability. They might be thinking about it in their own personal lives, but also looking to apply how they can apply it within their roles within the organization that they work for. There's about 10% of the workforce population that basically don't care. No matter what you do, they won't be convinced that this is something that either business needs to care about or that there's an issue in the first place. And then you've got about this big chunk in the middle, sort of 80% in the middle, that can be swayed. But that's the job of us as sustainability leaders, and ultimately then the CEO and leaders of the organizations that we work with, to try and convince that 80% middle that this is an important thing to do, and B, help them to understand how it applies to their job and therefore how they can contribute and help. And if we start to make it easy for them, give them, you get the ball rolling with them in terms of simple steps to start with, then we can bring that 80% along with us. And that, I'd say, that would extend out to the general population. We're looking at it from a consumer angle as well. There's a lot of that big 80% in the middle that we need to nudge sometimes in the right direction. There's 10% of the population that are already buying and doing lots of research before they make any purchasing in terms of the products and services they procure, whether they're buying them from responsible companies. And there's about 10% of the population that are climate change deniers and won't be shifted in their view, or don't care about people, so they don't care about human rights or whatever it might be. So I think when we lump young people, and I think it's a horrible responsibility to put on young people to say they're the ones that are going to help and save and clean up the mess that our generation or previous generations have created. I think A, is too much to put on young people, and B, I think sometimes we overestimate how much young people care about this. Don't get me wrong, there's lots that do, but I think there's lots across all age groups that care about this as well. So sorry, that was a bit of a ramble and a rant, wasn't it? But I'm not sure we can call out young people and say they're all interested in this and all raring to go and want to make a difference. I think it's more nuanced than that.
Yeah, no, I think yes, certainly having being a parent makes me aware that yes, not all the kids are the same. They often have quite different approaches to life. But yes, I think it's certainly an interesting area. David, just to round off, we have one question that's come in, and I thought as we've got limited time left, you might have a crack at it, and it's about the purposes of business, and if a business has a strong sense of purpose, it's more likely to be resilient. And I thought that might be a good reflection for you to lead us out on.
Yeah, thanks, Richie. I agree. I think certainly Rick and I are both judges on the Global Good Awards, and I think purpose features as a theme through most of what we see. We've been judges for a number of years now, and purpose, when it translates into action, I think really does then deliver those goods. But I think we've seen back to to frame that the answer to this in terms of the question we had. Is ESG the new, or is resilience the new form of ESG? And I think linking it firmly to that purpose, embedding it within strategy, and putting it firmly on the agenda of the CFO and the board, I think, so that it gains traction there is the way forward. I think really ESG is absolutely onto the radar of the CFO now, far more than it was previously. Financial grade reporting has changed that. An increasing number of CFOs are directly involved in running sustainability teams, if you like, so that purpose is now being given teeth in terms of the numbers behind it. And recent research suggests that 92%, give or take, of CFOs are planning to increase investment in sustainability initiatives because they can see the business case. So it links to a purpose, it links to a business case, and it links to a better business. So I think for more enlightened CFOs and boards, this is nothing new. They've been doing this for some time with integrated reporting, what have you. But in the end, I think if you link purpose to what you're trying to achieve with your aspirational targets, and they should be aspirational, they should feel a bit difficult to achieve, then I think that really linked firmly to what drives the resilience of a company, the ability to anticipate and manage risks and be flexible when they happen, the ability to adapt to changing circumstances, the ability to build strong learning cultures and continuous improvement by engaging people in why you're doing this. So this is the purpose of our organisation, and this is how we'd like you to behave. That I think really then, when you link that to the reporting, and you link that to the monitoring and tracking of key performance indicators that measure that change, then fundamentally understanding what matters to those who matter links it back to that purpose again. So I think the whole thing is one big linked story, really, which brings us back into what we started saying perhaps about 20 minutes ago, really, is that where this is greenwashing, or if it's hijacked or it's superficial, that will quickly be exposed these days. I think we've moved well into the era now where this is about purpose, this is about resilience, responding to shocks, and it's about better performance. And I think that should be the start point for a sustainability strategy. How does this link to what we do? How does this make us better? And how does this protect us against future shocks?
Great. Well, thanks very much. Well, that's been a fascinating discussion, and I'm sure we could go on longer. It's a shame in a way for it to all be online, but thanks to the audience for joining us. I hope that anyone who's interested can reach out to us through the situation chat system and or on LinkedIn, and they can also catch this as and when they're able to. So we look forward. Thanks again to our guest, Caroline, Rick, David, and we look forward to seeing you at the next month for the next version of Situation Room Debate. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you.